Hello everyone. How are you doing? Doing okay? Great. Nice to see those thumbs up. And thank you for being here so late. I know you're tired, but let's power on and find out some new and interesting things, right? So, today, what we're going to talk about is how to choose your next tech framework, anything really. You can apply the lessons you learn in this topic basically anywhere. But before we delve into the topic, I want to tell you something about myself. So, my name is Boris. I'm a software engineer at Euroherc Insurance. I'm also teaching front-end at Algebra in Zagreb, and I'm also one of the community leads in Google Developers Group Zagreb. But moving on to the topic itself, what are we going to have today on the menu? First of all, we're going to talk a bit about how to choose your tech when you're actually just new to the game, when you're just starting out. After that, we're going to see why and when could you consider picking something new when you actually have a pre-existing project, pre-existing knowledge, pre-existing notions maybe. And then in the end, we're going to talk about some negative things that we can encounter, some positive things that we can get out of them, and overall how to properly make yourself comfortable when choosing your new tech stack. So, as I said, first things first, let's see how are we doing when we're actually starting from the scratch. So when we are actually doing something from zero, we are a blank slate, essentially. We don't have many preconceived notions. We don't have any previous experiences where we can actually pull something through, which is also really important. So when you're actually starting from zero, first of all, you want to figure out what you want to build as your project. And also, maybe the best way to do this is to actually figure out the problem that you want to solve with it. And then by using Google, AI, ChatGPT, Bing, whatever, find out what would be the best technologies to do it. And why I'm making this so simple when you're starting out? Because you aren't really restricted by anything. You just want to do something. And by that, doing something, you're going to gather enough experience to actually make your own opinions. So essentially, you should just do it. Just start working on it. And also, if your initial solution, your initial choice won't work for you, then it's okay. Something else will. You just have to take it as you go. But let's be a bit more serious, right? So, when you have something pre-existing, we want to talk about reasons why would you even consider choosing something new, right? There can be a multitude of reasons for that. For example, you have legacy technology in your project. Legacy is something that's kind of hard to define, right? Everyone has their own preconceived notions of what legacy is. For some of us, it could be something that's 5 years old. For some of us, it could be something that's 10 years old or something that's 30 years old, like COBOL, Clipper, or something like that. So each of us have our own unique starting point when we're talking about that. Also, if you want to change the paradigm of how your app works, for example, you had a pre-existing desktop app, and now you want to make something that's a web app to be more accessible, or a mobile app, or anything else that's kind of related to that. And also, when you build something, it works for you at that point in time. So, for example, if you something that you have actually, like your current tech stack, might not work for you at the moment. Might have worked for you before, which was fine, but now it doesn't. And then you want to introduce something new. But also the reasons for this could also be a lot more simplistic. For example, your developers, your team, or you as a solo developer might just not be satisfied with the workflow, with the technologies that you're doing yourself, right? Like we've all probably encountered this one or two times when you're not really satisfied fully with the tech that you're working with. Then you want to switch it up. You want to change it. You want to try out something new. And also, something that's also really simple but extremely valid is that you just want to try out something new and see how it goes. You're intrigued by something. You want to try something out. Uh, you shouldn't be stopped, right? And there are also many, many more reasons. Like I can babble on until 9 p.m. Just about reasons why you would want to switch. So let's move on, maybe. Another interesting question is, do I have to change everything? And that is also like a cool thing that the answer is never always. It's never sometimes. The answer is always it depends. It depends on many, many reasons. Let's see what they are. For example, we have current costs. So we want to see how much we pay for something for our current tech stack or framework or whatever we're using at the moment. We do have to pay for infrastructure. We do have to pay for services. We do have to pay for developers. So we always have to keep that in our minds. Also, we want to consider what our developers are familiar with and what they actually want to use. You shouldn't, and in any case, force someone to do something that they want, especially if it's a team-related thing. And also, we have to consider how expensive it is to actually transition. Very, very easily, it can backfire on you just because you didn't consider the costs. You can say, for example, oh, we can do it in half a year, and then it goes on to be a never-ending project, and that you just have to kill at one point, which is not really a nice thing to do. Also, what it could depend on is whether our stack is modular. So being modular, it means like how many moving pieces do we have? How many Lego bricks, let's say, can we actually take apart and reassemble as something new? This is a very important thing because if you have something, for example, like a desktop app, which is like you have a desktop app and connection to the database, you have basically zero flexibility there. But if you have something like, okay, front end, back end, and database, then you're a bit more flexible. Like you can change your front end tech, you can change your back end tech. It's not always easy, it's not always ideal, but it's easier to do it than change just everything completely. And also, it would also depend on how many our needs are fulfilled, because we want to actually have something that works for us actually, right? And also we want to consider whether do we want it to be simpler now, because simpler might not always be a better thing. It can be easier thing for sure, but it might not always be the better. Okay, moving on. That now we've decided we want to switch to something, great. How do we actually plan it? So I've maybe gathered like 5 things, 5 steps that we want to maybe consider before actually switching and inside our planning stage. So we should always establish our project requirements, our project size, project scope, right? We want to understand what exactly needs to be changed and how many things do we have to change. Also, we would want to always reevaluate the current business logic, because you never know when somebody did something for whatever reason, right? Also, we should define our budget. How many developers do we need? How much do we have to pay for the servers? How much do we have to pay for this or that? And also, you should be mindful of maintenance, because maintaining something is really, really hard when you've planned it badly. Like you can just do something quick and dirty and it will be fine for a while. But as it grows, it can grow and you have to rewrite something. right? It's not ideal. So you want to actually do some more thinking in your planning stage. After that, we have to consider that there will never be a one-size-fits-all solution, right? And ideal way is to learn from other people's mistakes. We also can learn from our own mistakes. It's completely natural, but we would always want to prefer to actually just hear it from someone than not do it on our own skin, right? And you should always consider that there will always be room for improvement. Never optimize too much. There has to be a good enough stage where you're actually happy with what you have, and you have to just stop and move on. You can say it's completed at this time. We can move on, iterate over it at a later day. Also, you would want to look for the simplest solution that fits your build. You shouldn't just go around and make some crazy complex architectures when your problem is easy to solve. It's usually easier than you think. But we also like to overcomplicate things just because it's fun, right? So after we're done with all the theoretical part, now let's see what mistakes can we make and what can we learn from them. So now we're getting to the most important part, the part I want to stay with you from this talk. So how not to pick your poison. We're going to do some comparisons of what you shouldn't do, and maybe I'm going to offer you an alternative of what you should do or you could do. And whether you want to take it, it's on you, of course. So, first things first. When you're looking for something, the first thing in your mind would usually be to seek something that's a complete solution, right? It does it all. This framework can go very well on both web, mobile, desktop. It works on anything. It's great. But it can be viable in some cases, but it's not always going to be viable, right? And there always will be some gotchas when you scratch under the surface. There will be some things that are unexpected that you just discover and are like, oh, wow, what's going on? Nobody said that, right? And usually when you're seeking something that's complex and complete, it's usually like a jack of all trades and master of none, which is something that you should consider as well. What we should do instead is consider what we really need. We should look for what we need according to our requirements, both current and the future, of course. And you can use some stacks that you have, like T3, Pern, or Mern, whatever, as your jumping off point, something that you can use as an inspiration. And also, sometimes we as developers are very lazy, and we want to just download the whole library when we have to do something in this many lines of code. It's good to be lazy, but not always. So sometimes it's better to just keep our app simpler, right? The second thing I want to talk about is don't just go and outright copy others. It's always going to be tricky when you see like, okay, Facebook is doing this, Twitter or X now is doing that. And what they did might not work for everyone. 99% it won't for you. Those tags, the things that they're using, are created under their own circumstances, according to their own needs. And they are working to their team's strengths, not our team's strengths. So you also have to consider that. Instead, as I said before a bit, you should take what you need for them. Don't just blindly follow them. Question it. If someone has a great idea, use it. Take it as your own and expand on it, work with it. And taking good solutions from multiple sources, it's what's best. Another thing is that you shouldn't look for comparisons immediately. When you go, especially in the web world, right? You have millions of web frameworks. They're popping out daily. And now you have a decision paralysis. Like, okay, what web framework do I want to use? And then you go and search, and there's going to be like 20 answers at least somewhere, right? So you want to consider something, and that is downsizing, narrowing it down. Look for nuances, look for good use cases, and choose 2 or 3 frameworks or technologies that could work for you. And then you can compare them much, much easier when you have 2 things or 3 things than when you have 10 things or 20. So always try to actually compare a couple of things, not more. One thing that we often do is listening to other people when they're on a rant on YouTube or Twitch or wherever. Something sucks. It's bad. I hate it. And it's usually backed by "trust me, bro," or that kind of sayings, right? We shouldn't really do that. We should always have multiple sources of information and data. Something works for someone. If I'm recommending something, I'm just saying it works for me. I'm not saying it could work for you. I'm just stating something as a blank recommendation that is mine. Also, you should find perspectives from people that actually use that technology, because they know how to utilize it better than someone that just doesn't like it, right? And also, instead of blindly trusting other people, just try something yourself, right? Then we're always intrigued by what's next. What could be the next big thing? What could be really nice to try out to something new? We have to understand that technologies will come and go, and good ones will stay. And we would want to actually find some ways to improve our current technologies, which could also be a really viable option, right? And there's like this saying, all that glitters is not gold. You have to think about use cases. Just because something is popular, shiny, everyone's promoting it, doesn't mean it will work for you, right? Instead, you should take something that's production ready. It doesn't have to be old. It doesn't have to be 2, 3 years old just to be production ready. For example, you have ShadCN UI, a UI library that came out very recently that you can actually use now in production. It's great. Age does not mean something that you should take as, okay, by this number, it's mature enough. Can be mature enough from the get-go. It's not uncommon, especially lately. And also, you can always check Git repositories to see how other people are utilizing something, and also talk to people. If you see something that's new, if you see something that's smaller library, you're more likely to reach out directly to creators, and they can actually take your input, implement it, or you can just help them yourself and contribute. It's open source after. A mistake that we're doing a lot is taking the current things of doing as a holy Bible or a gospel. This is, I would consider it like something that stems out of us being lazy, right? Okay, we've done the workflow, it's fine, let's move on, just copy paste it, it will work, right? Processes in one platform might not transfer well to another one. And you shouldn't think of it as something bad, like a bad thing that you have to rethink something. Think of it as opportunity. And that way you can reframe your mind to actually seek better options, better solutions, instead of just copy pasting what you have right now. You should take your time and look for multiple solutions. Rethink your processes, try to improve it. As the app grows, you're gonna have more problems with it, of course. Over the years, problems were solved in one way. Those solutions can be very likely undocumented. And then you have some counters, some timers that you have no idea where they came from, why they are there. But when you delete something, your whole app comes crashing down. It's really, really hard to actually work with something like that. When you have those cases, just try to look for another way to solve this in completely different fashion. Also, the thing that we can subconsciously do is look for the benefits. Why is something good? And finding benefits is always going to be easy. And you can get hyped up prematurely for something just because you've seen how good it is, how many good things it has. But if you get too comfortable, too lenient, you will not recognize some things that can pop up as big bugs later on. And you should always see those things when you don't consider what you're doing properly. The thing that I would advise actually is focus on finding pitfalls. Try to find what the thing is bad at. Try to see what it can't do. Try to look for the weak spots and figure out what your new framework or tech is missing. What do you need to add? What do you need to modify for it to make it work for you? And that is also a thing that you want to consider. And something that's, I think it's a good advice for all of us, is to not be afraid of going back and trying again. Failing is a normal thing. Everyone is doing it at one point or another. Don't be afraid to go back, try again, try to redo it, rethink it. Use this as a learning experience. Try to get the best things out of it, not just think of the stuff that you did bad as a bad thing. Think of them as something good, like, okay, now I know what not to do, which is also valuable information. Okay, after we've gone through all that, let's see what could be our conclusion. So, the universal answer is always the obvious one. On Earth, it usually depends. If you're hitchhiking through the galaxy, it's 42. And you shouldn't copy others. You should just take inspiration from them. Look at that as a way of like loose guidances, not as something that's like straightforward, the gospel that you have to kind of copy paste. And you should consider many things always when you're doing something. But don't overthink. Try to be kind to yourself enough to know where to stop, actually, to not go too deep, to not get lost in your head. And as I've said, you should make mistakes. It's how we all learn. Don't be afraid of them. It's something that happens. It's a normal thing in the process. And you should take your time whenever you can. Try to think of it in a more deep way. And if you can't take your time, which is something that can also happen, okay, oh well, we have other ways of finding out. Like trying to look at all sides of the coin and trying to be objective. Trying to be honest. And not just, okay, it's easy, I'm gonna do it like that. And with that, I want to thank you for being here, listening to me, and for surviving until the end of the day successfully.